TV, a production of the Libertarian Party. This week, filling in as executive producer, Tara DeSisto. Filling in for, of course, Dan Fishman, who's currently working to enable us a great Libertarian Party convention. My name is Pat Ford, and I currently serve as the chair of the Libertarian Party in Rhode Island, and I am the alternate for Region 8 of the Libertarian National Committee. As we'd like to say at the onset of every show, there are a few purposes for tonight's activities. We want to give the Libertarian community an opportunity to meet, I believe, the strongest field of down-ballot candidates that we've had really in the party's history. We've reached out to folks running for town council, water boards. We've talked to folks who are running for congressional districts, state senate, board of eds, a real reflection of the cross-section of American politics, and I firmly believe the folks who will represent the future of the party at a national level, building us that bench that we've spoken of for many years. The second purpose of the show is to give Libertarian candidates an opportunity on screen, on video, to bring up lunch pail issues, as we call them, for their respective communities, whether they be congressional districts or town council districts, board of ed districts. Take those lunch pail issues and reflect through them through a libertarian perspective, how they can present them to their communities as they reach out to members both of the libertarian community and independents, Republicans and Democrats, for their vote. Equally as important, particularly at a time like this, we want folks to understand, as they get to know these candidates from around the country, that the men and women running for, say, the town council in a city in Oregon are as important to them and to the growth of the libertarian movement as someone running in their home state. Someone running for lieutenant governor of a state like Texas is critical to that same libertarian future that we advocate for here in Rhode Island. So joining us for the very first time is Oscar Herrera. He is running to be the state representative for what I call the Ohio House Big 96. Oscar, welcome to An Hour with the Candidates. How are you tonight?
Hey, Pat. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well. How are you?
Now, it's unfair. I know Oscar very well. We've had many conversations late at night on the Facebook, and Oscar has appeared with me on my show that I run independently. So I know a little bit about his campaign, but let's start from scratch for folks who haven't met you. What we always like to ask candidates, what was their libertarian moment as a young man? When did that light bulb go off? When did you have that personal epiphany that in fact that you believe in a future of independence, self-autonomy, self-determination?
Well, that being so young, it was very recent for me when I was I'm only 24, but I was in 10th grade. Part of our required reading list was Ayn Rand's Anthem. And
wow. Holy cow. Where did you go to school?
I went to, this was in Vista, California. So
wow.
Especially in the Californian school, you wouldn't think such a libertarian message in a progressive state would be part of required reading, but
right.
It honestly started something in me, because for me it was just a guy who wanted to progress society, and that's what the story basically was. But deeper was a guy who wanted to take charge of his own life, and that led me to read Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged next, and it just opened a world of just objectivism, libertarianism. I started watching Milton Friedman, and just once I read Atlas Shrugged, I realized, you know what, I could get behind this libertarianism. I didn't know of the Libertarian Party, but I started identifying with the libertarian philosophy at that age, and I've stuck.
You know, Atlas Shrugged is a phenomenal read for two reasons. Number one, there's obviously the philosophical conversation that is the underpinning of the entire novel. On the other hand, one can only be amazed at how prescient Ayn Rand was in writing the book when you look at today's events. How many of today's events literally feel like they've come directly from the pages of Atlas Shrugged?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some say it would be prophetic, but if you understand patterns, you really could just outline pretty much everything that's going to happen because of just how things unravel. and unfortunately, we're too stubborn to learn it better.
Right. Well, it's interesting because we've got folks now talking about ministers of production who will determine what is appropriate and what should be output, regardless of the cost and regardless of the potential profit to the manufacturer and regardless of whatever their desires are. And again, how much does that sound like the type of machinations that our federal government is involved in today? It's a stunning perspective. So you've gotten involved very quickly. This is your first election that you're running for, your first candidacy?
Yes, this is my first candidacy.
And how is it going? Tell us a little bit about, when we talk to folks on the show, we roughly divide their time into pre-COVID and post-COVID. I know that you were an early announcement and you were on the ground pretty aggressively early on. How did the first part of the campaign go?
It went pretty well. It slow and steady, I would say, because it was still before the primary. You don't want to divert a lot of resources for just monetary reasons, but it was pretty good. I held a few town halls, went door to door to get my name out there and signature. And it was pretty interesting to meet a lot of people who were open to the idea of a third party libertarian. And for them, it was just interesting because it's interesting talking to people because I was the first libertarian day I interacted with, which was a privilege and an honor, but it's also a high standard I have to uphold because if I'm the first, they're going to expect the same out of whoever follows me, which is it's just terrifying idea that I'll be the standard bearer of the Libertarian Party here in my section of Ohio. But now post-COVID, it's kind of more, really can't go door to door. I mean, now I could start going to because the state's opening up, but mostly building an online presence, sharing to groups that intersect with my goals as a candidate, my beliefs, and just building some name recognition and building a network.
What tell us a little bit about your district. Give us an idea for the major cities, the small towns. What is the economy based on? For example, is it significantly based in manufacturing? Do you have a higher education impact? Give us a flavor of the Ohio 96th.
Yeah, the Ohio 96 district consists of two main districts, Monroe and Jefferson County. I'm based in Jefferson County, and certain cities in Belmont County, which divide Jefferson and Monroe. But overall, it's very small towns. We only have what we would consider to the state of Ohio 3 cities, and at least 3 of them, those 3 are in Jefferson County. But overall, it's just very small town, rural, a lot of farmland. It used to be a big manufacturing economy with steel and coal, but in 2008, with the whole EPA crackdown, it really tore down the economy, and that was the lifeblood of the district. And in regards to higher education, we have one main university. There's another university that's just outside my district, but a lot of my constituents will go there. But overall, in terms of political demographics, it's very split, 60-40, if I remember correctly, the last election towards Trump. But my seat has been historically Democratic, and that's because we do have a strong Democratic presence here, even more so than a strong Republican presence, but Trump kind of changed all that.
Now, it's fairly classic, if you will, that along what America calls the quote unquote Rust Belt, which I don't know, I've always found that sort of a pejorative term. You've got traditionally the seat of great manufacturing over literally a 100 to 150 year term, brought to its knees, if you will, by government interference. Do you think folks in your district understand the relationship between what the government sought to achieve and the kind of central planning that went on, and, if you will, the collapse of the steel market and the collapse of so much of manufacturing in the United States?
Yeah, I think they do. They understand that pretty much as a consequence of everything shutting down, they viewed the EPA and all the environmental movement as a farce because it took away their livelihoods and opportunity for them to provide but at the same time, it fueled a very anti-democratic sentiment in the area, and
Hmm.
that's part of the reason why they aligned to Trump. They may not fully understood what he was for, but he was sounding off their concerns and just
Right.
repeating what. And I think that's pretty much what I have to tell people. It's like it doesn't matter who's in power, the red team or the blue team, that they're both going to use government intervention to push their agendas at the cost of your jobs.
Right. The not so subtle irony is that in so many of the communities that have been hobbled by the recession in manufacturing and what some would refer to as a jobless recovery,
Mhm.
a variety of initiatives of the Trump administration, not limited to tariffs, have actually been the final nail in the economic coffin. What
Mhm.
what's replaced, or has anything really replaced these manufacturing jobs in the communities that consist of the Ohio 96th?
N- Nothing at the scale of the steel and coal industry. There has been a natural gas boom, but that has been more out of state labor has come in with very few participants in state. We have had a steel plant open, and the goal is to hire like a thousand people from the community, which and they're pretty good paying jobs as well. And unfortunately, like the opioid crisis has kind of cut the labor opportunities down for a lot of people because
Right.
of drug testing and all that. But you, the there's a lot of potential here in regards to what economically what we could do, and hopefully, as much as we do need manufacturing, we need a more diverse economy, because if you rely too heavily on one industry, once that industry goes, your whole economy tanks.
Right. Now, and that presents for the candidate a very challenging picture because, on one hand, as libertarians, we certainly don't believe that government is going to guide the ship. I mean, I personally, over the last few weeks, taken great offense at the notion that the government is going to reopen the economy, as if
Mhm.
that they are even remotely capable of doing so. And if in fact they had any role whatsoever, that it would be proper in a free market. So how, and again, these are challenging issues even at the national level that
Mhm.
folks who've got, a lifetime of political experience are having difficulty getting their arms around. What do you say to someone, in your thoughts, to an individual, a family who, on a multi-generational level, has looked to manufacturing, probably union jobs, probably very well paid,
Mhm.
to support a standard of living that they've grown accustomed to, and now they've found literally ripped away from them. And again, this is prior to what's happening with COVID. Have you focused on that message, and what do you say to those folks?
Yeah, and honestly, I told people that it's going to be very hard to bring manufacturing back to the state at a state level as a state representative. But if I were elected as a state representative, it affords me the opportunities to talk to federal representatives and an avenue to the president to tell him, hey, your tariffs are hurting my district. Your
Hmm.
policies are hurting my district. It's not so much that I don't have the power to, it just it gives me the means to talk to these people and say,
Right.
because if it was just me emailing Donald Trump, the president, on the issue, it wouldn't really carry the same weight as, hey, this state legislator from Ohio, your policies are affecting his district, and he has some words for you.
Right. No, no, that's excellent. What, as far as the other issues go, revolving around the community, again, pre-COVID, educational. Does Ohio have a state formula for education? Is it again centrally planned, and funds are dispersed back to the community, or are individual communities on say a regional basis responsible for their own educational budgets?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. It's like we have our state education and our local districts. And unfortunately, right now with COVID, a lot of our districts, especially in my district, are losing money. I think around $3 million in total of all three and one count, and which doesn't seem like a lot compared to other districts, but to our small towns, that is a lot of money. It's programs that won't be funded, teachers that won't get paid, pink
Mm-hmm.
slips and all. But we don't really have much in private education, as I've seen. So it's very public education.
Right.
But really, if I were to talk about education, it's just seeing what infrastructure is in place, because a lot of the schools I visited aren't really as modern to, and in my goal, education is to prepare the students for the next generations for the next years, not to
Mm-hmm.
do what we have done so they could do better. So,
Right.
and honestly, one of the biggest mistakes in education was taking away like shop class, those technical courses.
Mm-hmm.
Because in all honesty, we've been feeding students lies that they have to go to college, these
Right.
four-year universities, and we're seeing that reflect in our policies, where we're asking for student loan forgiveness for sending kids to colleges to prepare them for degrees where there's no jobs, where the money can be in, let's say, welding, steel work, plumbing. So it's giving those students the option, not the option, but the opportunity to explore these ideas, these careers in school, and realize maybe 4 years college isn't for me. I'll probably be making more money as an apprentice and as a journeyman than I would in a 4-year college degree and all that.
Right. No, and that's an outstanding point, because ultimately, and that segues nicely into the quote unquote COVID question. One of the things that folks have come to understand is that in the absence of folks who can do tool and die, folks who can be manufacturing engineers, folks who can be involved in everything from steam fitting to plumbing to HVAC, to all the skills necessary to actually engage in some level of internal manufacturing. Because while we can't rely on manufacturing, clearly the absence of local manufacturing has left us in a very difficult position in a global market, and how to respond to a crisis to which a certain degree relies on manufacturing to rescue us from, whether it be respirators or any of the devices necessary, or the technology. So that's an excellent point, to try and guide communities into A, more self-sufficiency, and also B, let's look at technical careers for our kids. And maybe if we have enough of our presence, that will attract manufacturing at some level back to the economy. How difficult has life become in Ohio 96 because of COVID? I mean, first of all, have the schools been able to react with the right degree of technology so that this doesn't become a lost year?
Fortunately, a lot of schools have the online option, but even then, it's just everyone's feeling it. Students are, especially since I have a brother in high school and I have that ways, a lot of them are disappointed that they're losing their senior year, those precious memories that most of us will carry for decades, about prom, graduation. That's not going to happen. And unfortunately, I would hate to say it's life, but sometimes things happen, and unfortunately, government pretty much worsened the situation, and it's hard because, at least in my area, a lot of people are not working, a lot of people are staying at home, and I put up a survey on my campaign page on how has COVID-19 impacted your business. And a lot of people said they don't think their business is going to survive the next 1, 3, 6 months, which is crazy, and this only lasted 2 months. So we're not going to, at least Ohio, we're going to need to really focus on economic recovery, whatever form that may be in policy the next 2 years.
That's a great approach on two levels, because part of the conversation we're having tonight is about issues as they are impacting you locally and what issues are important, but also how do you as a potential community leader in effect interface with those issues. So you've actually reached out to the community for your own purposes in terms of data collection, but also to create a bridge and say, I need to understand, because I'm a candidate for office in your community, I need to understand intimately how you're impacted by this crisis. That's a fantastic idea. You're connecting them into ways that matter to them and matter to their day-to-day lives. I often joke about this. I try not to take this too lightly, but I would argue that most people in Ohio 96 aren't that concerned about Murray Rothbard or any one of the great Austrian economists that we so importantly that we look to for leadership. What they're looking for is solutions, and they're looking for people who are willing to listen.
Yep.
What type of other outreach have you done to the community like that? Because that's an outstanding idea.
Well, before I used to do, I was involved in the church, did youth ministry. So that offered me a lot of avenues to do outreach, like volunteer work, local food pantries, homeless shelters, and other, one of the most fun ones for me was mentoring young children, prepare like at-risk youth.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because that's something that I hold dear in my heart, because, if I think it was Frederick Douglass who said it's easier to raise strong children than to repair broken men, and it's true. If you get them young, set them on the right path, you don't have to worry about them when they're 30 or 40 and they're committing crimes.
Oh, that's outstanding. How has been, and by the way, sort of a persistent theme as we've evolved within this show over its first 5 or 6 weeks on the air is looking at the local government's response to this crisis, because it speaks a lot towards the ability of the private sector to react as opposed to quote unquote government. Now, in most states, finally, the federal government's getting the idea that it has to be on a state level. And I think particularly sophisticated states like Ohio need to understand that a lot of this approach needs to be done on a local level. Has the state government been responsive? And I say that I want to say one more thing. As a libertarian, I say that very carefully, because I believe that the free market is the ultimate answer to a crisis like this. But the state and federal governments have essentially hijacked so many of these functions. How have they performed under pressure?
In Ohio, I think we've done a mediocre job, at least our current governor. He reacted when there was 0 cases and pretty much started shutting everything down under the directive of our health director, Dr. Acton, who I think has been doing a horrible job in my estimation. Even though she is qualified in preventative medicine, epidemiology, she's a bureaucrat through and through. She's done grant writing. So we're dealing with a doctor who's more bureaucrat than practitioner. But apart from her qualifications, I think they haven't leveled with us. They haven't been honest. They were predicting 10,000 cases a day during this whole crisis. We've barely cracked maybe 60,000 last time I checked. So our estimates are way off. And unfortunately, in my view, government should be a nexus of information where they should gather all the information and present it to the people without an agenda and say, hey, these are the facts. And unfortunately, our Republican governor, wanted to play hero and make himself as the savior of the state during this pandemic.
So it is as the hero, have they mobilized folks adequately? I mean, it's when you say be the hero, they engaged in this massive shutdown. Again, you guys were amongst the first to do that. What did they do once they shut everything down? Was there any follow up? Again, they've hijacked the situation. Essentially boxing out. If you're a basketball fan, they boxed out a lot of the free market responses that could take place. What's happened since then? What have they provided beyond simply limiting people's options?
Everything they've done has been very reactionary. There was no plan going into this pandemic. They're like, you know what, this, at least in my viewpoint, it was like, hey, this is an opportunity for us to look good. Let's act now, shut everything down. But then in the response, they were like, oh, wait, our unemployment website can't handle the claims. Oh, wait, our medical staff is not accurately prepared. Our PPE, we're not prepared in any way, shape, or form. So everything they've done has been reactionary when it comes to testing, their orders. Our governor, within the day, flipped on the script of, do we need masks? No, we don't. Oh, wait, we do. He shut down the primary and effectively he pushed it to June, but then the courts ruled it wasn't. So everything has been very reactionary. There has been no proper procedure. And, as much as libertarians hate government, there's a proper way to do things at the legislative level. And unfortunately, our Republican-led legislator acted too late, 2 months too late, to limit the powers of Dr. Acton as the health director, when they should have been putting the brakes on her on day one, say, hey, we're the legislative body. We represent the will of the people. Let us do our job.
Well, it's again, unfortunately, Ohio, and this is one of the reasons why we challenge the duopoly. We don't discriminate, if you will, between the two leading members of the duopoly. Successive Republican governors who, quite frankly, have weaponized the state's political system for their own personal, if you will, promotional benefit, while at the same time blocking out any real possibilities that the private sector could respond in the ways that the private sector so often does, which is solutions based on real world scenarios. It's unfortunate. Give us, if you will, this is the part of the show where we like to engage in what I call shameless self-promotion. So what I want you to do is tell folks exactly how folks can find Oscar Herrera on the web, how they can contribute to your campaign, find out where you stand on the issues, and give you support as we move into the next stage of the election season here.
Yeah, when we're watching this, just look up my name, Oscar Herrera, for 96th District, and my website was electoscarherrera.com, and there you will find all my issues, how to volunteer, donate. My Facebook page is just Oscar Herrera for 96th District, and then for Twitter and Instagram is OH for OH96, which it's
excellent. We're going to bring you back on towards the end of the show and have a little conversation with our next guest. So, Oscar, thank you very, very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Pat.
And we'll see you back here in a little bit. Folks, if you're just joining us, you are watching, listening, An Hour with the Candidates on LPTV, a production of the Libertarian Party. A big thanks to Dan Fishman, who's normally our executive director, but right now he's actually working, as you can imagine, on convention issues. Tara DeSisto is filling in ably behind the scenes as production engineer. And of course, a thanks to Nick Sarwak, who helped put LPTV into place. Currently, we broadcast on Friday nights at 8 o'clock. We've got an overwhelming response from candidates who want to participate. So we're looking at, in the next week or so, going to twice a week, an hour each time with 2 candidates each hour. My sworn goal is by the end of November to have found a way to get every single down ballot candidate who's running as a libertarian in America somehow on the air, to give you an opportunity to understand where their campaign is coming from, how you can support their campaign, how they're incorporating what we call lunch pail issues into issues that are viewed through a libertarian perspective, and at the same time gain a greater sense of what's happening in the nation as we develop this quote-unquote libertarian bench. As I say every week, Dan and I have decided at the end of the season, November, we're going to put a couple names in an envelope, and in 10 years, I'm convinced one of those folks will be running for the presidency of the United States as a libertarian. We've had some outstanding candidates, which should give all of us great hope in troubled times. Joining me next is someone I've just gotten to know. His name is Duane Whitmer. He is running for New York's 27th congressional district. If we could bring him up on the air, he's running for the United States Congress. Duane, it's great to have gotten to know you, and welcome to An Hour with the Candidates.
Hey, Pat, thanks for having me.
So, Duane, give us a little bit of your background. You know, we always talk about, you probably heard me with Oscar, that libertarian moment. When did the light bulb go off over your head? When was your epiphany?
So I was always a little bit libertarian. I grew up in a small town, Franklinville, New York, really small population, really low income area. So I developed a couple early policy points, and I was always pro-gun. Growing up where I grew up, hunting was a big thing. Large deer population, a lot of people hunted to feed and provide for their families. A lot of farms which used firearms as a tool to defend their livestock and crops from predators and from pests. So they were always viewed as a tool, not a hobby, not an activity. They were just a basic tool. So I was pro-gun, and growing up where I grew up, a lot of my friends went into the military. So I became anti-war pretty quick. So went to Fredonia State, a state school, and became a Democrat because that's what I thought I should do. And then got out of college, became a Republican because that's what you do, and realized that both parties are absolute garbage. No offense to the voters. The voters are great, but the people that run the parties are all one and the same. War doesn't stop. The spending doesn't stop. I became an accountant, started my own business, and I realized that red or blue are kind of the same. And so 2016, Gary Johnson caught my eye, and I ended up voting for him because I liked a lot of things he had to say. And I figured, it's a protest vote, but hey, it's me sending a message to the two parties that I'm not owed their vote. Called myself a libertarian, kind of wasn't really active, wasn't really involved. And then met Larry Sharp. I live in New York State, so I met Larry Sharp, who ran for governor in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And he was my official aha moment where I said, okay, this party's ready to be taken seriously. They're running good candidates. They're running decent candidates. They're running candidates I can respect and get behind. And ended up joining his campaign, getting involved. And then I decided to be a candidate because, like I said, Gary kind of turned my head and got my attention, but Larry kind of sealed the deal. It's a lot like that. A lot of people liked Larry, but they're not 100% committed to the LP yet because it's only one guy. And New York State can't rely on Larry to get everything done. It's just unfair for him. So I said, well, what if I can be the second movement where they say, okay, we saw Larry, now we see another candidate. The LP isn't going anywhere. They're running serious campaigns. They're running serious candidates. We can take them seriously. We can vote for them. We can get involved. Stuff like that. So that's kind of how I joined.
No, I love the passion. If there's a common denominator amongst a widely varied group of people that we've had on in these first few weeks of the show, different age groups, different backgrounds, different educations, different careers, the single uniting factor is a passion both for the movement and for liberty. So that's outstanding. I feel that coming right through the microphone. You mentioned in terms of issues, you mentioned the anti-war movement, and you are running for federal office. Yesterday, or about a day and a half ago, I guess, the United States Senate voted on a resolution, or an amendment, I should say, to the Patriot Act that would have blocked the federal government from searches of individuals' browsers without a warrant. Incredibly enough, in the year 2020, with everything we know about war, everything we know about the military-industrial complex, that amendment failed. It failed, and it failed by one vote. And I find that very, very frustrating. What's going to be your approach? What's going to be Duane Whitmer's libertarian approach to privacy issues, spying, domestic spying, as a congressman?
The biggest issue you run into is both parties are one and the same at the end of the day. When it comes to that, obviously I would vote no spying, no warrantless searches. It's violation of the Fourth Amendment. But both parties are one and the same when it comes to who buys them. Halliburton, big, war profiteering companies donate to both Republicans and Democrats. It's frustrating because both parties are anti-war when the other person's in office, but expand war and don't bring our troops home when they're in office. So I don't know what I can do alone against the war machine because I'm one of many. There's only a few of us that are really staunchly anti-war. My goal with that is to lead an educational campaign, kind of like what Massey did with the stimulus bill.
Right.
Everyone hated him at first. Turned out he was absolutely correct. I'd plan to do things similarly, where I may not be winning because I'm going to be standing for up against the machine, but I'm going to call them out when I can, and I'm going to try to educate the public on what's going on. And I think more people need to step up and do that in office.
Excellent. The power of being able to simply propose legislation, even if it's doomed to utter failure, is a tool that's greatly underutilized by the anti-war movement. Because
Right.
every time you propose legislation, you get up there in front of a media, you get up there in front of your fellow citizens, you get up there in front of your in front of veterans of multiple generations who have seen the horror of war, seen the uselessness of it, particularly all the young veterans here in the libertarian movement who bring such honor to us by their service, but at the same time bring such power to us on a moral level. Every time you do that, and that's a great point because that's so often missed. We know that it's going to fail the first 10 times, maybe 20 times. But every time you do it, you bring to light critically important issues. And that's why it's so important to get libertarians elected, even if we are in the minority in the beginning. You're right. Mr. Massey did an admirable job of pointing out, despite what he knew would be incoming missiles of every state, including from the quote unquote small government, fiscally conservative president of these United States. And I say that with a smile on my face. So no, that's absolutely outstanding. What issues resonate in your district right now? What's important? You know, folks, Oscar mentioned, we didn't have a chance to get into it. The opioid crisis, the war on drugs. What are those type of issues that are operating at a federal level that resonate with your community?
So my district's really weird because I'm in New York State, so everyone assumes it's a blue district, but it's actually one of the most pro-Trump districts in the North. It's kind of a weird place. It's also very rural. My district is gerrymandered, so the cities of Buffalo, Rochester, and Niagara Falls aren't included. So it's a really rural, small town pocket in Western New York. And so our issues are pro-gun, obviously, a lot of farmers, pro-small business, pro-small town. It's a pro-Trump, so it's a conservative-ish district. Unfortunately, abortion comes up a lot, which I'm not a huge fan of talking about, to be honest with you.
Right.
And kind of that kind of stuff, the economy, opioid crisis is an issue here as well because, to be honest with you, the opioid crisis is a problem because small towns are dying, jobs are leaving because New York State is a terrible place to live or do business. And economic studies have shown it's the least business-friendly state in the nation. So what you have is small towns are dying, businesses are leaving, jobs are leaving, so people are struggling and they're turning to things like that to get through. So the opioid crisis is a problem because our economy's crushed. On a federal level, it's hard because the state has a lot of say in how things go, but it's a really weird district because it's, like I said, it's rural farming communities. Used to be thriving farming communities, now they're not, because farmers can't make money anymore, unfortunately.
Right. Now, what's interesting to me is you're in a district that is, as you said, very pro-Trump.
Yep.
But when you point out some of the challenges that the farming community faces, and not knowing really what crop products that your economy is relying on, so many agricultural communities in this country have been crushed again by tariffs. And we are in a I say this with a smile on my face. But I'm crying inside. We are a nation that has imposed tariffs to the detriment of our farming communities, who are then going to be granted federal relief in order to make up for the loss of business, which is going to be paid for by money borrowed from those same countries that we've placed tariffs on. And we just throw one other at you. When it comes to the Second Amendment, libertarians are, as we say, unabashedly, unapologetically, unreservedly pro Second Amendment. In fact, most of us look beyond the Second Amendment and look to our natural rights as a reason to be able to bear arms. So the reason I bring these issues up is that on one hand, quite frankly, this quote unquote Republican Trump wave is actually in action is miserable on the Second Amendment because of their insistence on red flag laws, which target some of those very same veterans, I believe, so unfairly. It's grotesque. And they're terrible on farming. How can you, without being negative and sounding like a Democrat, how can you convince folks in your community that the person that they look to as sort of a savior, if you will, or they look to in the 2016 election is actually a prime reason for some of their misery? You
can't. So my logic is this. I'm not going to lie to you. I do sponsored ads and I see it all the time. I'll say, actually, it's really funny. I made a comment on one of my ads. I did an ad, and someone said, well, if you're not Republican, I'm not voting for you. And I said, okay, well, why is that? And he went on this rant, and I said, well, a Republican president sent my friends to die in the Middle East. And it got like a bunch of laugh reacts, which it is what it is. It's Facebook. And so you go to the profile of some of the people that are laugh reacting, and they're the type of people that Donald Trump can walk in their house, punch their grandma in the face, and walk out, and they'd be like, well, Graham, you might have deserved it. Donald Trump's a great man. He's fighting the country. Better red than dead. And so you can't. So what I usually do is I say, my stance is I'll work with President Trump if he passes a bill or tries to do a bill. As an accountant, as a small business owner who knows how this works, I'm going to work with him to adapt to change it. I'm not going to go. What my Democratic opponent goes to anti-Trump rallies in a sleeveless shirt and yells, "Not my president." Instead of doing that, I'm going to be the adult in the room. I'm going to sit down with him or the committee I have to sit down with and propose changes that are actually going to help the district and try to accomplish both sides. It's called compromise and bipartisanship, not line in the sand politics that we have today. And that goes pretty well. So it's not an insult to President Trump because, like I said, he could rob their grandma at gunpoint, and they'd say, "Well, Graham, you had some nice things, and he deserves it because he's fighting this country and getting attacked by them fake news." So you really can't go against him to some of these people. And then I get it; they're looking for a lot of these people, and it makes sense. A lot of these people are looking for false hope. They're looking for a false prophet. It happened in 2008 with Obama. In my opinion, a lot of disenfranchised communities, a lot of beat down, downtrodden communities looked for him as a beacon of hope, and he failed them. And Trump did the same. He tried to appeal to the outside people who were beat down, downtrodden, have kind of given up, and he was their beacon of hope, and he has kind of let them down, and they don't want to stop clinging to that because without that hope, they lose their essentially faith. They lose their hope that things will get better. As much as it pains me to say this, there are people that truly believe the government will make your life better. They believe one person will change your life, and it's not the person in the mirror. It's we're going to elect a politician and we're all going to be rich. It's it's just factually incorrect. That's actually what's furthered my libertarian agenda, is that the only person that can make your life better is you, not me, not my neighbor, not Bernie Sanders, not Donald Trump, not Vladimir Putin, not Justin Amash, not even Larry Sharpe, how great of a man he is, not me. My goal is to empower you to live your best life by removing the overburdening restrictions and regulations that don't allow you to grow your business, grow your company, and support your ideas. The government shouldn't be hindering or pushing your success. The government should be out of your way so you can achieve your own success.
I'm getting, Tara, if you're out there listening, I'm getting chills tonight. You nailed it. You both candidates came to the table with these statements. One was hope and change. The other was make America great again. Both statements on their surface value are absolutely meaningless in one sense, and yet can mean anything to anyone as they choose to view them. So they simultaneously said nothing but spoke to everyone, raised this false panacea that an individual was going to be their hope and change or going to make America great again. And I guess depending on what your perspective is what defines what's so great about it again. Right. And so for some, it meant it was implied it meant a renaissance in manufacturing. That's never happened because in part because of their fiscal and tariff policies. For some, it meant perhaps something a little uglier, perhaps a little bit more pervasive. You read into it what you want, and as a result, your expectations are never diminished, and simultaneously your hopes are never dashed, because now we're going to keep America great again, whatever the hell that means. It's I love the attitude, because it would be so easy as a candidate to get disheartened by it. I know a couple of guys who are talk radio hosts, right? Not exactly putting themselves on the line, but at the same time, on a daily basis, they talk to Trumpers, and fact, reason, logic mean nothing.
Both sides. But this is the best part. This is the best part. A pile of dog crap can run for president as a Democrat or a Republican and get 15 to 20 million votes. Let's be honest. A literal pile of dog crap could run right or left and get 15 to 20 million votes. Those people are the loudest. Those people are the most obnoxious. Those people send me death threats. But the people in the middle, they're the quiet ones. They're the ones that aren't sending me death threats. They're the ones that listen. They can sway the election. 100 million people didn't vote in 2016. That's our target base right there. That's what sways an election. So in my district, it's those people who've given up. They're kind of, just beat down, downtrodden. They've given up. They've lost hope. That's my target. The people that are kind of in the middle, that's my target. The loudest people, like I said, Bernie Sanders can push your grandma down a flight of stairs. You're still going to vote for Bernie, and she'll have socialized healthcare with no problem once Bernie's in charge. And we're going to tear down the 1%, and it's going to be amazing, and it's going to be a utopia of government cheese for everybody. It doesn't matter what you say, because their feelings, fact and logic, rationale, logic, numbers, doesn't apply. It's emotion. It's emotionally driven. The far right and the far left are so easily emotionally triggered that if you insult the guy they voted for, they will literally fight you. That's mind-blowingly insane. But that's what you're dealing with. It's the people in the middle are the rational, intelligent, logical thinkers. That's our target market. Those are the people we have to get involved and get fired up to understand that we are trying to make a change. And the two-party system has failed. The legacy parties have failed them. There's nothing to lose by doing something different, because stagnant wages, never-ending war, $25 trillion in debt. You're not really getting anywhere you think you're getting with the two parties. Right. So, send the message to the establishment, so to speak, that you're done. You're going to try something else.
By the way, in Boston, we call it welly cheese. If you get your welly cheese, you're getting taken care of for the month. Again, let's engage in some shameless self-promotion here, as we say on the show. Tell us all about where folks can find Duane on the web.
So my website is DuaneWhitmer.com. I have a Twitter. I think it's Whitmer for NY27. Google Duane Whitmer for Congress Twitter. It shows up. I don't run my Twitter page. Someone else does. I have a volunteer for it. And then it's Duane Whitmer for Congress at Facebook. So that's kind of my thing.
No, that's outstanding. Again, I love the passion. I love the passion. I also love the real politic of understanding that you can engage and just beat yourself to death trying to take on the extremes of both parties. And accomplish nothing. If you found your potential base, you're looking to work with them, and you're looking to give them back the control in their lives, and that's what people like that want, and that's how we grow the party. Grow the party through races like this.
I had a conversation with a Republican. I was in Wyoming, New York, at a town festival, and a Republican comes up to me and says, "You're running for office." He goes, "Are you a Republican?" I said, "No, I'm Libertarian." He goes, "Well, I'm not voting for you." So I said, "Sir, if you don't want me asking, humor me. What part of my policies don't you agree with?" And he gave the generic Republican manipulated stance on what libertarians are. I said, "Well, none of those are my policies. You're actually incorrect on my policies." And he said something, and his mic drop moment was that we had a little small back and forth, and I realized the conversation wasn't going anywhere. And so his mic drop moment was, "Well, you're not getting my vote." And I said, "Well, honestly," or he said something like, "Something tells me all I need to know." And I go, "Well, you do understand what you just told me, right?" And he goes, "Yeah, that I'm not voting for you." And I said, "Nah, you said that a bunch of times. But what you really said is you're unable to think for yourself and make your own logical decisions." And he goes, "Well, excuse me?" And I said, "Well, what you just said is the letter after my name is all that matters to you when you vote, which means that someone else has to tell you how to make decisions and how to vote. And that is embarrassing for you. You think you're embarrassing me by saying you're not going to vote for me. Everyone here listening to you say that thinks you're insane because you're unable to make your own decisions. You know nothing about my policies, my platform, who I am, and what I'm about, but you won't vote for me because someone else told you to vote for someone else." And I go, you can't make your own decisions? I go, that's embarrassing for you. And he storms off. And someone goes, well, that's kind of a, mean thing to say. And I go, well, he needed to hear it. He doesn't care what I say. I could tell him how to cure world hunger. He's not going to listen.
Right.
But everyone listening then came up and said, you're absolutely correct. It's the both parties. One thing we deal with as third-party candidates as libertarians is the Democrats and Republicans. And I'm going to say this, and people are going to get mad, but it's true. Republicans and Democrats psychologically and mentally abuse their voters. They manipulate and con their voters, and they say, you can't vote for a Democrat. Will say you can't vote for Libertarian. They're a Republican that smokes weed. Factually incorrect, but the Democrats don't want you to leave them and go to a better party. The Republicans will say, well, they're gun-toting, abortion-loving hippies that smoke weed. Again, factually incorrect, but they don't want you to leave their party. It's like an abusive boyfriend. They don't want you to know there's something else out there. They're going to manipulate you. They're going to mentally abuse you into thinking they're the best option for you. They don't want you to make rational, intelligent decisions. They want you to be afraid of what's out there. And as soon as you break through people.
Why is it? I want to bring Oscar in, but I always have to ask, it's a rhetorical question. Why always the weed? Why do they always talk about the weed? Yikes. Let's bring Oscar back in if we can. Oscar, welcome back. We're running a little long right now, but okay. Oh, great.
All right.
We just got a minute or two, but you've had an opportunity to listen to each other. You're running in similar, I'll just say generally similar districts for vastly different offices. Oscar, what are your thoughts about tonight's conversation and what Duane is so powerfully evoking?
I think in regards to his last point about reaching out to people and letting them decide on who they should vote for, and fortunately for like me in the three-way race, it's like, who do you want to represent your interests? Mm-hmm. And it's not going to be, and I have to present the best case that the Libertarian candidate myself is the best person to do that, because that's the office I'm running for. State representative, I'm here to represent your wishes at the legislative level. And overall, like you said about Massey and the stimulus bill, you have to hold these people accountable to their votes and to really show them where they stand on the issues. And one of the tactics I'm going to use in my debates is to hold both candidates to their word, as long as they're people of integrity that stand by their word, that, hey, I oppose raising all taxes. I oppose the creation of new taxes. Can you say the same? And if they can't, the voters are going to be like, well, this guy didn't. The Democrat or the Republican didn't agree with that statement.
No, that's actually always in a conversation. Think of it as a negotiation. You're not asking people to think about something. You're asking them to commit to something. When you ask someone to commit to a point, then you're forcing them to go on the record. And that's a basic negotiation, but it's so very important. Duane, what are your thoughts about Oscar's race? Any suggestions?
No, I kind of do my own. It's the reason why I don't suggest other things to other candidates is because in the libertarian philosophy, I don't know your district, I don't know your race, I don't know your people. So it's tough to really give any input from a different state. I would say that don't waffle and don't change your views because you think you have to. That's one thing I see a lot of candidates do. Me, for example, I'm running in a pro-Trump district. I'm not going to say I'm voting for Trump. I'm not going to say I love Donald Trump and I wish he was my dad. My Republican opponent did that. My Republican opponent was a never Trumper. And now all of a sudden Trump endorsed him and he's like, everything Trump does is great. I wish he was my dad. It to me looks like typical politics. And again, the far right's going to love it. But the people in the middle are hammering him and saying, well, I can't trust anything you're saying. My Democratic opponent did it. He was pro-gun, then he was anti-gun, then he's on guns. Now he hates the NRA and doesn't think you should own a gun and makes fun of gun owners in a very, very pro-gun district. If you aren't the popular opinion, that's okay. Find common ground in things you are. So, for example, everyone loves guns in this district. I'm pro-gun. It works out. Everyone in this district thinks abortion should be banned. I don't talk about it. If they bring it up, I'll say my speech, but that's it. And I move on to something else and say, look, we can debate about this, we can disagree about this, or we can move on to something we agree on, and I can try to earn your vote. Don't get caught up in the like I said, I run advertising and I run sponsored posts on Facebook, and don't get caught up with people that are going to come on and bash your page. They're going to put you down because you're not red or blue. They're not worth your time. It sounds really bad to say, but it doesn't matter what you do. They're not going to support you because there's not an RD after your name, and that's unfortunate. And it's hopefully that they come around and someday learn that other people care about them more, but focus on the ones that are going to support you.
Excellent. Well, yeah. Gentlemen, thank you, both of you, to joining us tonight. For folks who are listening for the very first time, you've listened to An Hour with the Candidates on LPTV. It's a production of the Libertarian Party. A big thank you to Dan Fishman, who's generally our executive producer. Tara, thank you so much for filling in this evening. And of course, a shout out to Nick Sarwak and the Libertarian National Committee, who originated this show, and originated the channel. There is a great deal of programming that is on place here. Some fun, some very serious. Make, if you will, what's the old term? Bookmark this page. We look to increase our programming as the year goes by, as we get closer to election time. Again, if you're a candidate who would like to come on the air with us and join us for An Hour with the Candidates, feel free to reach out to me. My name is Pat Ford. You can find me on the Facebook. pford@coalitionradio.us is my email address. And I look forward to everyone in the country getting an opportunity to appear on video, to discuss their candidacies, what they're passionate about, and of course, most importantly, the issues. Folks, thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you next week.
Good night.